Hey guys, this is Charles Lee. Welcome to Environment Design 2, Week 1. We'll be covering basic composition, value, and color theory. I'll probably won't get into color too detail until Week 4. That's when you guys actually start the color thumbnail, right? Well, first 3 weeks, I'll have you guys focus on more, in basic composition and the foundation for creating, more compelling and realistic environment. So yeah, but definitely I'll explain just the basic of colors, which is color theory, the triads, like complementary colors, and how you guys can use from color wheels. Just quick basic stuff in week 1. But week 4 is actually when we actually really get into colors. So talking about composition, I'll quickly explain in week 1 what the golden ratio is. The rule of thirds. Right, a lot of you guys already know how to do this, but it's always good to repeat these foundation skills. And I'll probably give you guys some examples from like 19th century master painters. Such as Jerome. How he used some of his composition to make his focal point. And sometimes the Ridley Scott, and one of the best living director out there, how he uses composition as his tools for his films, right? Are you guys familiar with this painting? I think Jamie Jones did some his painting studies from this exact shot. He changed a couple of spots, but yeah. So Cry Mullins, how he uses the golden ratio, the graphic we just saw. I think that really, perfectly fits in here. The composition that Craig used here to kind of move our eyes to focus on this guy right here. All right, so I'll give you guys a lot of different. Another 19th century painter. I think his name is Longsdale or Longsdale. Not sure if there's an N in between. Yeah, so he uses beautiful composition, and to kind of move our eyes around. Having primary focal point here, and then just putting our eyes in different places using different composition skills. Yeah. Richard Schmidt, considered to be the best living painter out there. Yeah. So I'll probably give a lot of show you guys his paintings as a sample when it comes down to values and composition and even colors. All right. Then to talk about the values, I'll quickly explain what the 9 value is and how you guys can organize your values in the high key paintings and low key paintings. I probably won't get to that too much, maybe I'll save that until we actually get into paintings. But it's always good to know how you can organize your painting in this 9 value system. And definitely, you guys are a huge fan of the Game of Thrones. So sorry for the spoiler, but yeah, I usually screen grab. If I think the shot it has really great values or composition or colors. This is definitely one of the shots I found the latest episode. It's just stunning the values. So I'll show you guys a lot of different samples from again the movies, the painters 19th century illustrators by Dean Cornwell, and another movie shots from Kingdom of Heaven. Right? Yeah, it's beautiful. The value organization. Alma Tadema from 19th century paintings. Another Dean Cornwell, I think. Yeah. So yeah, all these masters they're so good at organizing their values, right? And then they understand how to use that. It's another one by I think one of the Orientalists. I forgot his name, but the way he uses his black, his dark shapes against this white shapes in foreground. It's just amazing. Another one by Shushinsky. It just has just great, just 2 value system here. So I'll explain all that. Another Amatema is really high contrast between the value of this character's hair and mostly the really bright walls and their clothing. So I'll explain all this in week 1. Colors. Let's quickly talk about colors. Yeah, like I said, we'll get into more colors in week 4, and it'll be much easier for you guys to see how I apply actual colors to my paintings. But we'll just go through like basic stuff, right? Because I assume like you guys pretty much know like just the basic colors, and every artist, all you guys have like kind of your own way of like kind of applying colors to your painting. So yeah, let's just go through like it's just quick the basics here. Yeah, of course we have like color wheel here, right? Because you guys pretty much know the triads, the main primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and complementary colors, right? That the colors that kind of located in exactly opposite side in color wheel, right? And those are the complementary colors, right? So when you guys mix complementary colors together, right, and then you get gray. So which is if you get red and green, and then you get gray. If you mix the purple and yellow, you also get a gray color. The same thing like when you mix in the blue and orange, right? So and then these are the really the popular color combination when you guys look at a lot of paintings, right? So what's really important thing is like I mentioned in the competition earlier, because I don't want you guys to kind of stick with that rule of thirds, right? Or like the golden ratio. So if you just kind of stick with that all the time, and then your painting gets really boring. I think the same as the colors too, right? I mean, there's more than there's way more than just like triads, right? Or like there's way more than just there's no reason you always have to like use complementary colors. They are just one of the options, right? They're just the one of the options. It doesn't work that way, especially when you try to achieve like, for example, I want to paint some kind of like the castle scape, right? With like huge castles sitting on top of like this kind of crazy the towns, right? And then you wanna add like, but I kind of want to paint it in dawn, right? So, and then you don't really go for, hey, I wanna when I want to paint dawn, hey, should I go for like purple and yellow? Or purple, yeah, or like the orange and blue. It doesn't really work like that. Because I'll probably show you better when we actually get into colors in week 4. But yeah, but at least I kind of want you guys to think about this, right? So when you think about the colors, I mean, there's 3 big things in color. One is a value. Definitely each color has a value. Also, the color has a hue. Basically, the hue and color, they're the same, same term, right? So, hey, what's the hue of this, right? That means, what's the color of this? So the hue of this is a blue, right? And then the hue of this is like orange, right? And then there's another one more the aspect of about the colors. It's called one of the property of a color is saturation, right? So okay, so how orange that is, right? I mean, they're both orange, but I would say like the saturation of this is a lot higher, right? Than this orange, right? The same thing here, like that's more saturated than actually this color, right? I mean, there's a huge range of saturation, right? So also, this is also I learned from the guy I mentioned earlier. I think he's one of probably the best colorists I ever learned from. Is Nathan Fox, right? The one thing that he taught me that it really changed the way my way to approach the color was he was telling me like once, and he came to the Blizzard once too, to teach at the artist at Blizzard. It was about a year ago, and then he mentioned something about the color. That's really that changed my mind. Is he mentioned that like, okay, don't really try to think about like what's the difference between colors. He mentioned, okay, what's the difference in temperature, right? So I'll explain like that. I explained a little more as we go through some samples here, right? Again, this is Norman Rockwell's Santa painting, right? Again, this great example of like complementary combination, right? It's a green background with a red, like bright red, right? Which is great. I mean, again, guys, like there's no reason you can use the complementary colors. I'm not saying it's bad. it's just one of the options, right? You guys can definitely use it. One of the most popular combinations is blue and orange, or even red. Orange and green. You see it. See that combination a lot in a lot of like actually the concept paintings too. So here is so basically what the Nathan was talking about was don't ever think about okay, that's a red or like that's a green. Think more as like, okay, if that's a red, how green that is, the compared to red, which means like the temperature, right? How cool that is, right? Compared to the how this one color, right? So let's look at another example here, right? So this is like very high key painting, right? High key means like we look at the 9 value system earlier, right? So the high key, let me just pull that up like quickly. Let me we go back to the value here again. So yeah, high key, just quickly, high key painting means like most of the value in your painting, it's really consist of all the values are consist of this range of value. Doesn't mean you can use black at all, but what I'm saying is like most of your painting is a range of really high value, right? So which means high key. So you can put couple of like just dark spots to make a focal point, right? And also the other way around, like in the low key painting is like a lot of nice scenes or a lot of kind of hazy days, paintings. Like you can use most of your painting value will be probably like around here, that which is called a low key painting. Again, you can kind of put some highlight spots here and there to make a focal point. So okay, so back to, so if you look at it, like it's mostly high key painting, right? So her gowns and this furniture here like is very high in value, right? But when we talk about color here, right, it's you see pink and you see like this dark umber, all that. So again, when you think about colors, just don't really think like, oh, it's just pink and brown. So when I apply this to my own painting, like, okay, how should I like pick this pink compared to this, right? So that's exactly what Nathan was talking about. Like, so just think about, okay, instead of think this as like just pink, think as like, hey, that's a color maybe like 50% warmer than that that white, that gray right there, right? Of course, they're different in hue, which is this is more like cooler gray, and that's a pink. But at least like once you know that that's different hue, and once you pick the hue, the thing you have to choose after you pick a hue is, okay, what's the saturation I have to pick? It means like, wait, what's the temperature? Should I go high in temperature? Should I go down in temperature? Right? So definitely you have to go high in temperature. So if you kind of change, you guys kind of thinking of a way to approach to color, I think it'll be easy. And another like it's a really famous John Singer Sargent. The Sargent painting here is very high key painting. Again, you have blacks, right? You definitely have blacks. But it's in most of this, but the overall painting of this is very high key, right? So again, he used like very warm here. He used a bit of like orange here, like a yellow and like purple, gray in color. But just think it more as like, okay, how warm that is compared to that gray color right there. It looks very cool compared to like because transition from like the cool color to like this warm orange down here. It's the transition is very very subtle, but like it's very warm here, right? So even within this girl here, right? Just think as like, okay, how cool that shadow is, right? Compared to the how warm that is, right? So what's how cool you should go down to get that kind of specific color from here, right? So if I paint this, what I'll probably do is usually not sure how many of you guys actually took traditional like oil painting or acrylic painting. Is like usually you paint the dark to light. Also some instructors like you're supposed to paint like cool color first and then just warm later. So because a lot of people say, okay, the warm color tends to like kind of pop out, right? And then cool color tends to recede, right? Most of the cases, but it's not all the time. Okay, it's so totally different. Because right before sunset, actually, is around like the 4 or 5 o'clock. If you look at the sun, actually the sun is really far away from you, and then it's very warm there, and then a lot of things in front of you, which is way closer to you, like it's really blue, really cool. So that kind of contradicts that cool recedes and warm pops up. So don't always think that it happens all the time. It's there's some exceptions too, right? But let's say if I paint this, right, I'll probably go back, and then knock out, block all these like cool colors, and then I'll probably put this warmer yellow later. But the way you judge it, how warm this is actually, you have to compare from here. You have to start from here, right? So everything I explained so far about color is what you guys can also say is colors are very relevant to its surroundings, which means that the color of this the cloth is very warm because of the surroundings, right? Because of it's on top of this very cool like grays, right? But if you just take this yellow and then just put it right next to like bright, even like in a brighter yellow or like bright red, right? It actually looks cooler, right? So colors are very relevant, right? So another Howard Pyle is like really great example of like orange and blue, right? And they're complementary colors. It's very saturated, right? So but it still works. I think it's a little more stylized in here, but it's really kind of great example of like in use of the color wheel, like the complementary colors, right? Okay, this is the ice Longsdale again. I guess you guys I showed you guys one of his painting earlier when I was explaining the composition, right? So if you look at this, and this is a great sample of like the value is first, right? If value works, no matter what color you put it on top, and it still works, right? So let me show you another sample, exact same painting. It looks very different, right? But I think both are great. I mean, personally, this is obviously is a little more too orange, saturated, maybe because of the printing or because of the monitor, if something happened. But I still think it's very, very, still, I think it works great, right? Maybe for some people, like, this might be, like, a little more emotional, so they might like this better. But in terms of the natural color-wise, this is the right painting. But, seriously, like, I really don't see, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people say, like, okay, they might like this painting better, right? So I think just because its value works out so nicely, so it doesn't really matter what color you're putting in. So if you look at this, is also it start from very kind of like the gray painting, right? I don't think the Longsdale like started painting that bright red or like bright yellow like here. So I'm sure he started with like somewhat in middle of like this cool gray versus this warm gray. So he start from the middle. He probably, he start from like this kind of like half 50% burn the yellow ochre actually. And they probably like knock the whole canvas down to that, and then maybe he kind of slowly started like putting this like cooler the gray. So I'm pretty sure like he compared this gray to this very warm yellow ochre, and then he kind of judged okay how cooler he should go on these, right? And so he slowly like brought this up. He was thinking about the values and all that, right? So yeah, so very different paintings, but showing great use of like values. It can be, you can apply any colors on top of it. It still come out great. Crime Mullins, right? This is a really quick sketch, but it's another the sample of like the green and orange, right? So it's not directly the complementary, but again, like I said, you don't always have to use complementary colors from the color wheel, or or triads, right? And you can always have the unity in the colors and the variety as well, right? To try to use that, just except like complements and triads and all that, right? So I think I think Nathan also mentions in his color lecture this as well. He really emphasizes on this too. Another Howard Pyle painting. If you look at it, another great complementary, right? Like olive green versus this red, bright like a red color. It's a beautiful piece, right? So again, his graphical shape, the stuff we talked about earlier, right? without even before we get into colors, right? It's great separation between that black shape against that light group, which is this. Don't think it as like green and red. At this point, first thing you guys have to be able to do to analyze your own painting or like someone else's or your study painting. The first thing you have to distinguish is your shadow group against your light group. Okay, then you get into okay, this is complementary use, right? The green and red. So yeah, hard pile space. Yeah, so these were like in a couple samples I showed you guys. Again, I just picked this kind of few pieces, just quickly kind of explain to you guys what colors, how colors actually work in complementary situation, and and color wheels as well. But to me, it's just I learned this in color theory in the fourth term at Art Center, right? But it's really hard for me to apply this to my own painting. So even though I learned this and I know this in my brain, but when I actually try to kind of apply this to my painting, I'm like, you guys kind of have to know this. Just I don't know how many of you guys actually piano, right? But when you actually play the piano, right? You don't really think about like it's just each note, when you actually push the right the notes, right? Like it naturally comes out. When you're singing too, right? It just naturally comes out, even though you know it in your brain, but you just have to like it naturally comes out, right? Exactly same thing as a painting, right? You even though you like try to memorize all this, right? And okay, complementary colors, the triads, like red and green and blue and orange. But when you actually paint actual painting, you kind of have to put that back all kind of behind you, right? And then like try to just paint it, right? Like and then try to have fun, right? It naturally comes out. So, but you guys can only achieve that from like just doing a lot of exercise of doing this, right? We'll get into more of that in week 4 about colors, right? So I'll definitely show you guys what's my own way of kind of getting like kind of compelling like environments colors, right? I sometimes I use photos, or sometimes I use the samples of like this master paintings. There's a lot of different ways to approach to that, right? So okay, yeah. Then I'll cover this the color again in week 4. So what is composition? Composition is usually the placement or the arrangement of the visual elements that you see in the pictures or photos, even the movies. So I think it's really I think value and composition, those two elements are probably the most important. Someone will say the color as well, but for me, I think it's composition and color. I mean the value are the most important. The elements in your painting. So this is the early image we looked at. This is the golden ratio. This is you have like this spiral relationship throughout the entire photo, right, or pictures, right? So the other compositional elements the people use a lot is rule of thirds. So when you divide the exactly in 3 length and each side, then you get this 9 the rectangle. So anywhere you put your subject into this the crossing points, and then you'll be successful, right? So I mean this is probably like mostly use the computational tools out there. I use this as well, but I'm not a huge fan of like using this for every single of my painting. Just because the reason is like your camera shifts all the time, right? Because when you create the compelling environments, you don't want to just stick with the one camera, which means you don't want to put your camera always in very far, or always in the middle, or always like too close, right? So you want to be able to kind of control the depth of your camera, right? So if you only use this rule of thirds in your paintings, I think your entire portfolio look very similar. Very similar. I've seen a lot of portfolios actually look like that. So because they're so stuck with this just the rule of thirds, and mostly like all their like environment painting, they kind of look the same. in terms of the composition of it, right? Even though their colors are different, their values different, but somehow the arrangement of the whole, the picture, they're very similar, right? So I don't want you guys to kind of fall for that. So I'll address again when I actually show you guys the demo a little bit. So let's look at some of the how these 19th century like master painters, how they use this composition. Not necessarily the rule of thirds or like the golden ratio, but the picture has enough elements, right, to move our eyes around, right? So obviously this painting is done by the Janlian Jerome, I think one of the Orientalists. So the way he kind of compose our eyes is definitely he wanted to make this guy, I don't know whoever that is, right, the king or the bishop, or he wanted to make this guy the focal point, right? So he used this graphical like elements, which is like the railing on the stairs, right? And then this group of people, the way they kind of bow to this guy. So they're kind of forms into like this big arrow, right? So our eye actually kind of naturally travels to like from the left top to down here, right? And then also draws like a really big line here, right? So we can kind of focus on this guy, right? There's some other elements that he used as well, so such as like there's like a bit of the curve right here too, so our eyes doesn't kind of bounce back out of the composition, and so it kind of grabs our attention again, back to this guy, right? So that is the composition that he used to make this guy as a focal point, right? But also there's a value reason why we kind of we tend to look at this guy, right? So I'll explain more when I explain the value after this. But if you look at him, he's just wearing the black black clothes, right? The black hoodie. I don't know what that is, right? Like it's just maybe the old priest clothing. So his darker value actually really pops out from his surroundings, which is maybe like 40% gray, right? So actually that's what really makes him as a focal point, not just the value, but also as well as the compositional elements that he puts, right? Also the staircase is actually gradually kind of make our eyes to travel through him as well, right? So this is John Jerome, like one of my favorite compositional piece that from the 19th century. So let's look at the next one. Also, this is I'm not sure how many of you guys recognize this movie. This is one of my favorite film in terms of the visual language, and the story, and that the battle scene is pretty epic too. This is the Kingdom of Heaven, directed by the Ridley Scott. And I grabbed a lot of screenshot from that movie, right? Just colors and the values are just amazing throughout the entire movie. You guys actually if you guys haven't watched this, and definitely I recommend any Ridley Scott's movie. It's just amazing. It's just every shot is just like epic. You can totally just use for your concert pieces. So this is one of the shot that he in the movie, right? Jamie Jones did the master copy of this very shot. He kind of changed things a little bit, but there's a reason why he started this piece, right? The just composition in here is just amazing, right? Because the way he kind of set up this table, and then he put a big chair in the foreground, right? So it automatically it becomes the shadow groups, right? So this entire shadow groups, it kind of leads our eyes to this guy, the Orlando Bloom, right? And then he's against the darker valley, which is this pillar, right, or the wall, right? And then because the light is hitting his face really really strong, it automatically creates this really bright rim light, which make his face pop out so much from this darker background, right? It's not just that, right? And one of the most important thing in a composition is your dark set.